friends. We're getting in the holiday spirit here at the Allender Center, and we have a special gift for you. From Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve, all of our online courses are on sale. This is the biggest discount we offer throughout the entire year. If you have been considering taking one of our courses, such as To Be Told, a course that guides you through knowing your own story, or the Marriage Online Course with Dr. Dan Allender and Dr. Steve Call, now is the time to sign up. All of the online courses from the Allender Center are self-paced, and you get lifetime access, so you can go through them anytime you'd like. Online courses from the Allender Center are a wonderful option if you're looking for a meaningful gift for someone special. Plus, they're delivered straight to your inbox, so you don't have to wait on shipping. Visit theallendercenter.org/offerings and click on online courses to get our best prices of the year now.
Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachel Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
We are so near Christmas that it is, again, one of the best seasons to reflect on the incarnation. And I have a delightful guest, a dear friend, colleague, Sue Cunningham. Sue, you have been on before, but unfortunately, I think probably most people don't go back years ago to hear past episodes. So I'm going to introduce you again. And that is Sue Cunningham is a therapist, spiritual director. She is a colleague and friend working in the Allender Center, both teaching, leading groups, providing utterly needed maturity to all who have the pleasure of knowing her. So Sue, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And it's great to be here during Advent, so near Christmas. I've never done that before.
Well, and again, as we think about Advent, I literally had no one else that I wanted to have be part of this conversation. So let's just start with Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you. I am really leaning into Advent, and that's the period of time, it's usually, 4 Sundays before leading up to anticipating Christmas. And that's just such a rich time in the midst of all the chaos of, Christmas. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here during this time and kind of leaning into the season.
Good. Well, to further say why I would want you particularly, you are unquestionably one of the best therapists I know, and one who opens the door to the intersection between one's life and heart, but also the story and the life of Jesus. And in that rich interplay, I would say also, you are one of our, there are a number, but one of our great poets at the Allender Center. And in that, the conversation's going to play between the reality that we all decorate our homes. Maybe not all, but the majority of people do something with regard to a seasonal acknowledgement. And in that decorative process is one that actually is incredibly creative, even if it's fairly standard in terms of the things you bring out from your attic and you put up on your door and your tree, etc. But there is something about the season and creativity. So that's going to be the focus. But first question really is, how do you decorate your home?
Wow. Okay. I always start with a wreath because the greenery, like a fresh evergreen wreath, for the sensory experience of being able to smell it and just see it and have it be kind of pervading the room or our home. And also, it's the easiest thing for me because I think that when you think about creativity and decorating, or how do I express this wonderful, this wonderful season that is complex. It's not only super happy for a lot of us. It holds a lot of emotion. And so when I think about decorating, I think of anticipating, I just think of how can I put up something that is a beginning. And for me, it's a wreath because I can get it, I can smell it, I can see it. It's in the air, it's in my sight, and it's easy.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you proceed? Like if you begin with a wreath?
I begin with the wreath, and then I just try to put up things. I mean, one of the things we did, especially when our kids were little, is we collected stockings. We collected like different kinds of ornaments every year and different sort of symbolic things. But I like haul out the tubs and go through it.
Yeah.
And just kind of see what speaks to me this year. I don't put up everything all the time, but what speaks to me this year? What makes me happy? What do I want to look at for the next, 6 weeks or whatever it is? And that's what I do. What do you do?
Well, the wreath is really important too. And again, I didn't make any of them. Becky made them all. But there's like a wreath on our front door. There's 2 or 3 wreaths around the house. So that's a really common. But they're all made from material from different homes that we've lived in. So some of these wreaths have been, they're rather shaggy, but they hold so much memory. And then the next, I think, revelation are, I'm going to exaggerate, not like that's a new phenomena, but like 200 or 300 creche scenes, nativity scenes. And some of those have been gifts from dear friends. Some of them, the ones that I think matter most to us, were made by folks who were escaping sex trafficking worlds. And so they are, we have some from Asia, we have some from Africa, and they're just glorious. Each and every small piece, like it's like a puzzle piece that when it all comes together, it's just stunning. And then we had years where, you know me, I'm pretty cheap. An artificial tree was sufficient. And it lasted, I think, almost 25 years. But it was beginning to be so threadbare that we finally gave up its ghost and began buying trees. But we often cut a tree, yet it looks like, and I purposely pick, usually a Charlie Brown type tree, because there is something about an inelegant, inauspicious tree that for me holds something of the complexity of this season, but that does not fit the aesthetic perfection of the one that is my beloved. So the Charlie Brown tree currently is outside of the garage of my office, which lingers outside appropriately, and then inside is a freaking $45 tabletop tree that is like, I can't believe we paid that much for a tree. But nonetheless, it is stunning, and it gets decorated.
If you got a tree for $45, I hate to say it, but you're doing pretty well.
No, I'm talking like it's like 3 feet tall. We're not talking about a decent. When I say tabletop, it's a freaking tabletop tree. So again, we looked at one that was a little larger, and it was $75, and then like one that most people would have that have gifts and such, and children and grandchildren, that would be like $90 to $120, and I'm like, we're going tabletop. If you want a perfect tree, it's going to be teeny. So all that to say, it is so fun. I just, I don't do a lot of the decorating because that's more of what Becky chooses to bring to our world in terms of handmade, stockings for each person. They get laid out. It is beautiful. And it's so, when I say reminiscent, it is something that holds memory for us, but also it holds that sense of anticipation of what the day of Christmas and the season of Advent holds. So that's our decorational orientation.
Well, I think what you're saying about memory and this sort of year after year, we begin to have rhythms and traditions. And I think this idea also of belonging and home, that like there's a place you come home to, there's a place you belong that has the things that you remember from years past, from, like you were saying, the different creches and manger scenes. We have some that have been carved from olive wood from Israel that are just, very special gifts and reminders of other times that even seem so far away. And yet here you have this very concrete image that we can look to when we feel like, we don't know what this year's going to hold. And that's one thing I do love about decorating as well and creating is lights. I love just the very simple twinkle lights. And like a lot of people at night, to turn the light, to turn everything off, but the little lights, it brings some sort of magical or spiritual element of quiet, even in the dark, that there is light.
Yes. Again, the lights on the tree. And every morning for us, we get up early. So Becky set this, I don't know what it is, but it's something that turns the lights on without us actually having to do it. And it like 5 a.m, the lights come on. And I love getting up right before it so that I am, in one sense, in the presence of the light shining. And that process of beauty, of light, of memory, I'm going to state it and then ask you to engage it. Like, this is really meant to be one of our most creative periods. So how is, shall we say, Advent and the season, beyond just the idea of decorative, how is it for you creative?
Well, I think that what you're just saying is, it is such a beautiful rhythm that you get up and you wait in anticipation of light. And of course, that's reminiscent of Genesis 1, like there's light and God's most creative beginning. And I think that that's what this season of creativity is. It's like we get to participate, we get to collaborate with God in so many ways of creativity, with the way God moves in the world, with the way, the Christmas story, Mary, Jesus, like the whole story is all about creativity and God. And I just love the thought that, God is the original creator and we humans are image bearers. So we get to share in that creativity. But, what I always say to clients is the enemy, the evil one, is not creative.
Yes.
The enemy, the evil one, is relentless, but it just kind of cycles through the same things, and it's all derivative. It's nothing creative. It's nothing new. And so that's what I also love about creativity is it's so uniquely godlike and human.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what you bring us to is that Genesis 1. Let me read a section out of John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word. Just that echoes indeed the beginning of Genesis 1. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I mean, I just don't think there is. There are other incarnational Ephesians 2. There are other sections of the incarnation that, we could easily bring into this conversation. But in terms of the interplay of the creation of the universe and the incarnation, in some sense, the incarnation is a cleansing, a restoration, a new creation to address what had occurred as something of the ruin of what God intended in the Garden of Eden. So I don't think John is anything other than highly cognizant of the play between his beginning and Genesis chapter 1. So when you think of all the things that I just put words to from that scripture, light, darkness, creativity, that nothing was made that was not made through him, all that implies that if this is not a creative season, you're missing something of the glory of recreation. And this is recreation. Recreation, just slightly different pronunciation that I intend, but it's spelled the same way. Recreation and recreation are parts of what it means to be part of the incarnation. So again, want to ask you to ponder it's something of your own creativity and how you bring like words to a page. Again, we'll have a chance at some later conversation, like in a week, to open the door to some of your poetry. But for now, I'd love to hear how you create, particularly in this season.
Yeah, I think that, when you were reading that passage in John, it's just so full of the sensory, and that is, I think, the key to creativity is using all the senses. And a lot of people will know, like, this season is marked by, like, as we were talking about, creative decorations and light, and also music and the sounds and the carols and the instruments and the richness of sound. And then there's the taste, the food, the rich, people start baking and cooking and planning menus and trying new recipes, because there's something about being embodied, being creative, being an image bearer, that, like, to use all our senses of sight and sound and taste and touch and to be able to take it in, that is one thing, which can be kind of overwhelming, but also very very accessible too, very beautiful. And so for me, I think this is true probably for everyone, is you find sort of where you're drawn creatively. Like, I love to eat good food, but my joy isn't really to create in the kitchen. And I love music, but I'm really not about writing music or songs or singing them solo. But like you, Dan.
Yeah. We won't do a duet, I promise.
Okay, great. But I do love playing with words on the page. And that's kind of a new thing. And I remember conversations that we have had in years past about play and how, Sue, you need to play. And I was like, I don't really know how to play. I don't feel very playful. And it was like this very kind of exciting discovery to discuss, to, realize, oh, I play with words. And so, of course, the passage that you just read, the word becoming flesh, John is definitely playing with his own words and echoing Genesis. It's very fun. And so that, I think, each of us kind of find what are the ways that we like to play the best, or that's accessible. And that doesn't mean we don't develop it and that we don't work hard, but it's kind of where we're drawn. So I was drawn to words, and that's kind of my realm.
Well, and how did you discover that? How did you find that your playground it's got, the instrument of words?
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm going to say, like, I didn't really realize it until I turned around. I was like, oh, it was everywhere. So right before one of my birthdays, I was in line getting coffee, and I was waiting for my order, and I turned around, and there was a big board where, different people and places had posted different offerings. And there was an offering for a poetry workshop. And it was near my birthday. And I looked at it, and it had one of those things you could tear off the number. And I was like, I don't know why, but I just want to do that. And so I came home and I said, John, like, I know what I want for my birthday. I want to do this poetry workshop. And he's like, great. And when I started, I literally tell the story like I was like in preschool, kindergarten, like, and here there were all these like accomplished poets and different people, but everyone was so kind and so accepting. And they just kind of took me by the hand and helped me find my voice. And as I look back, I would look at old journals and things as I was in the middle of these workshops, and I would find little fragments of poems that I've been writing all my life. I just hadn't put two and two together. And so I would say, like, I've always been a poet, but it's only been very recently. Even this summer, I had this, big sort of come to Jesus moment to say, will you call yourself a poet? And it was not an easy thing to accept and receive and name, even though it's like what I wanted my whole life. So that is how I have discovered, and I've been discovering, and I'm still discovering.
Well, and you saw fragments. That's such an interesting category. You saw fragments of verse, of thoughts perhaps put within what we'll eventually talk about as what is poetry. But for the moment, we'll just say in some poetic form. How were those fragments working for you when you were younger? I mean, what were you doing?
Well, I think I was expressing myself. I was trying to find a way to express myself. And the thing that is so funny, and I say this so that people can kind of understand, when I look back at the fragments, like, they're very, very juvenile. They're very immature. It's not like I go back and I say like, oh, I found all this fantastic poetry that's really amazing. It's like, no, it was very undeveloped, very, very primitive. But what was important to me is the expression of it, the self-expression. Mm-hmm. And of all the things I could have been doing, I could have been drawing, I could have been painting, I could have been writing songs, I could have been singing, I could have been doing physical things at that point. But to express myself, it was poetry. Mm-hmm. And that self-expression seems for me to be the important thing.
Well, I've heard you say this phrase a number of times from a particular poet who talks about poetry as being on the slant.
Oh, yes, Emily. Yes, thank you. When you can't speak directly, you speak to the slant. And that's what Emily Dickinson said, tell the truth, but tell it slant. And I think in my family and other families in the world, like, sort of a prophetic voice, which poetry is a very prophetic language, as and the scriptures are full of. But if you knock people over the head with things, they can't hear it. It's too much, and rightly so. But if you come in from the side or from the slant, it's a little easier to swallow. It's a little easier to take in. And that's also the play. That's what makes it fun, because it's not creative to just hit someone over the head with something that you think is profound. But what is creative and fun is finding a way in that can kind of go in before they even realize it. And that's probably what poetry has done for me, entered me without me even realizing it. And the same way that I think God and the Spirit like enters into us and speaks to us in ways before we even realize it.
Yes. Yeah. So again, not necessarily walking into your whole history, but what would have compelled you to be operating in the slant as a young person? And how, in one sense, did that work for you to find a voice, even if that voice didn't get found fully, and maybe never fully, but fully until you almost accidentally ran into, a phone number and a birthday present. So does that, shall we say, inarticulate question make any sense?
Yes. No, it's good. I think that, a couple things are at play. One is all four of my grandparents were genocide survivors from the Armenian genocide. And I talked about that, I think, on this podcast at different times. And so speaking and silence were very embedded. Like they never talked about their experience, but we all knew it, or we were supposed to know it. It was kind of like, we're not going to talk about it, but you have to know. And so there was a lot of picking up of clues. So I spent a lot of time just feeling my way through, especially the years we lived with my grandmother, and, just spending time and with the rhythms, with the food, with the ways that we move through the day, and with the talking and the way she would engage with me, little things like teaching me and having me help her fix her bed every morning, and like picking up just little things from the way she moved in the world. As a survivor of genocide, which I knew, but I had no idea what that meant until later in my work, actually, with the Allender Center and being trained in trauma care. But the other thing was, and not unrelated, is I was really shy as a little girl and young. I was, sandwiched in between two very brilliant brothers. And, I was shy and I didn't talk all that much on one hand. On the other hand, I was constantly trying to elbow my way through as well. But I think that that's one way that poetry and words kind of, they were very internal, because I had a lot of internal world, internal imagination, internal things that you couldn't really see until it came out in kind of a creative expression.
Mm-hmm. So to me, it's a way of saying, look, play is not distraction. If it is, it's an escape. But in some deep, deep sense, all our play has at least a resonance, a connection to something of our heartache, something of the reality of, why do we need recreation? Well, because creation has in some sense been fouled. And in that, we know things are not as they are meant to be. And we have an impulse. Again, this sounds so anemic to use this word, but we have an impulse to improve. And if we take that word back a little bit to say, oh no, to improve, we want to create goodness. And that is so true with regard to what I'm hearing for your story, that as a shy, but also a young girl in the midst of having to read clues. I think that phrase is a lovely phrase to think about, not only how one writes poetry, but how one's meant, in some sense, to read poetry. But also, it's also one of the reasons why you're such a good therapist and spiritual director. You can look at fragments. You can look at, this is a harsh image perhaps, but you can look at a crime scene and begin to follow the track of the clues. But what we're really talking about is the incarnation is a mystery, not so much to be solved, but in some sense, to be transformed by. But if we don't approach the incarnation, the wonder of God becoming flesh, within that sense of, what? Like, if there's not some sense of offense, of like the scattering of expectations of this doesn't make sense. So in some ways, the incarnation is a form of poetry, in that it's working in each of us on the slant. At least it's meant to, versus just a frontal, Jesus is God, he was born of a virgin, etc. And again, not that I challenge any of that. That's true. But when you approach it head on, open door, yeah, isn't it wonderful, versus being in some sense surprised or offended, or surprised, offended, overwhelmed by. Does that resonate with your sense of creativity?
Yeah, I was just going to say there are a couple of things that really struck me. And one is when you said the mystery. The mystery, I think, is meant to be not just like you said, solved, like a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be entered into. So I think of mystery as an invitation to literally step into it, taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it, all the things of the senses, to try to understand, but with using the word understanding, not like, oh, got it, like I comprehend it, but what little clues, what little things are being revealed to me. And I think that's the mystery of the incarnation, is these revelation, these revealed moments, realities, things, that are definitely in the gospel story, but also in all of our lives. And I just want to say one thing about the distraction. Play is not distraction. I think with art, what play is, it's like it transports us. So it is like at another level. It's not like I'm distracting, I'm trying to get out of this world, but it's more through art, whether it's poetry, music, the visual arts, a film, all of the ways that that we can, a beautiful meal, a taste that can transport us and let us know, like, oh, there is more. There is a world that is opening up to me in this mystery. I don't understand it, but I'm here for it. I'm into it. I want to be part of it.
Well, and before we end, I just want you to ponder, how does this conversation, shall we say, lean you into your gift purchasing for those you love?
Well, I mean, I do think that when I'm being creative, I am my best self. Like I'm my most loving, because I think creativity is very, like, it's synonymous with love. I think that's how God is, and God creates in love, and He did create. God did create. God is still creating in love. And as I become more creative, and I will say, and I do want to say, it's not necessarily easy. It's not automatic. There is, like in anything that you try to develop, whether you're playing an instrument or doing something, like I said, in the kitchen, or on the page, or on a canvas, or, there's so many in film. It takes work. It takes like sitting down. It takes discipline. It takes like doing it when you don't feel like it. It takes like participating when you feel like, I want to judge this. I want to say it's terrible. I want to say, like, why even bother? I'm not Emily Dickinson. How could I write a poem? But again, that just gives up on the entering in, on the mystery, on the participating, on the collaborating. So it feels like it's a collaboration with God, with other humans, because I see other humans all the time creating. And when I cannot judge either myself or them, then it does become fun. It does become play. It's like, let's all create and let's all love.
I love that. And for us, for at least for me, it boils down to, look, if you want me to buy you a pair of slippers, fine. Tell me what kind of slipper, and given our capacity to feed the dark entity Amazon, it's so
send me the link.
Send me the link. I'll buy it. But why don't you just buy it? And I'll give you the money. I'll Venmo you. Wouldn't it be simpler? Or why wait till Christmas to get it if you actually need slippers? Get them. So I think we've come to this point of like if you want money, just tell me. No, I won't give you that amount, but I'll give you X amount, and do with it what you want. Because for the most part, the purchase of gifts, unless you really have studied, pursued, understood what a person, to purchase something that the other person doesn't know they want, yet they deeply want, I think is one of the great surprises. But it takes a lot of labor to be able to do that. So that's one direction of what I would call incarnational gift giving. Surprising gifting that you didn't expect, didn't actually know you want, yet in the receiving, it's all that you could have ever hoped for. To me, a second is time and experience. Like the kids have known that every now and then one of them will get 2 meals with me where I take them out but we're going to read a book, and they either get a choice or I get the choice as to which book, but it becomes then what we're going to talk about at the meal. And the first few times it was pretty cool. Now it's like, oh, who's going to get dad? Who's going to get dad? And at least he takes you to a nice restaurant. I don't really care. Creating conversation that actually engages the word meaning all of reality, all of life, and the presence of the goodness of God in the land of the living. That becomes the playground for getting to know people, getting to receive and to give, where there is actually the play of mutuality. And I think that's in part what I want us to be able to move toward in our next conversation, the mutuality of a conversation about one of your poems, particularly a poem related to this season. So welcome back when we do.
Okay, can I say one thing?
Oh, you say whatever you wish as we end.
You talked about like this surprise and the knowing. And so to give a gift where you actually know the person is very vulnerable. And so, it's vulnerable in a way that like ordering the link that you sent me or giving you money or cash or Venmoing you is not vulnerable. It's kind of the sure thing. But when you create, and I think this is where God and a lot of the characters in the scriptures come to life to say, it's so vulnerable to give a gift. It's so vulnerable to know and to hope you know right, hope you're on point, and hope they respond the way you think and hope they might. It's really a beautiful knowing and vulnerability.
Yeah. And so maybe my last sentence is, I don't do that with my grandchildren because I want them to have that joy of ripping up a present that they kind of know they want. Maybe they sent a note to Santa. I'm all for that. I'm just talking about when you're dealing with your adult world. Do you really just want to send, a pair of sneakers that they've already told you they wanted? this is that realm of the playfulness of this incarnational season is the realm of recreating, of recreating, of playing, but playing knowing and being known in a way that takes our heart into a connection with one another, but a connection to the living God who has become the humbled, if not in one sense, totally vulnerable baby in a so-called manger. So as we engage this, Sue, I look forward to our conversation next week.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.